Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 quick match gameplay. This time around I'm playing as a lizardmen against the High Elves led by Do You Even on the map, the Black Forests. And I'm trying out a bit of a High Elf counter build here. Quick explanation I guess is, when you do quick matches lizards against high elves. One of the biggest problems for any faction dealing with high elves, really, except for dark elves, which the immense amount of ranged armor piercing, is dealing with Phoenix Guard. Phoenix Guard causes fear. They have huge amounts of melee defense and attack as long as their HP is over 50%. They have a built-in 30% physical resist, very high melee stats even without the martial mastery, and respectable armor at 100. They're fairly mobile. Just all in all, they're anti-large armor piercing. They're just a very, very powerful unit. So for most factions, especially for Skaven and Lizardmen, who are very susceptible to those things, and Lizardmen especially, who lack strong melee armor piercing to deal with it, since Temple Guard are not really ideal for fighting Phoenix Guard. They don't have as good armor, they don't have a built-in physical resist, their melee stats are nowhere near as good. Their only real advantage is a slight boost in weapon strength. The Lizardmen have huge issues. Their skirmish power is largely too weak, their melee strength is not good enough. So the end result is that you have to rely on, and their monsters get shut down pretty heavily by the anti-large bonuses of Phoenix Guard. Anti-large armor piercing, I guess, is the important part there. So I'm trying to build. I tried to make a build here that could counter that, and so the core counters here are really my hero squad and my kind of Lord Hero Goon squad. First and foremost, of course, I brought Krokgar. He's basically a go-to pick nowadays, or as of now. Simply put, he's fairly cheap for what he does. He comes in on Grimlock, of course, with very high armor at 100, very solid melee attack and melee defense, huge weapon strength, very high charge bonus. He has Frenzy, of course. He still gets Cold-Blooded, which is a heal, just like every other hero or Lord. He causes fear, terror, has built-in missile resistance of 25% on top of that huge armor boost. And then he does, of course, I brought him in with Sacred Spawning of Zodal, which gives him even more physical resistance and 18% vigor, Deadly Onslaught, Swiftness of Eitzel, which is a good escape skill, on top, given that he has high mass on top of that, it makes him very hard to shut down, and Hand of Gods, which gives me a bit of a burst against enemy heroes or lords. Alongside him, I did bring two heroes. I brought a Skink Chief. The Skink Chief is unupgraded, but he does also come in, the Skink Chief has nothing on him, but he is mounted on a Stegodon, not an Ancient Stegodon. It's very important, and this is really where things come down. Both him and the Skink Priest are mounted on normal Stegodons, and the reason I did that is because the normal Stegodon comes in with a Ballista or Giant Crossbow, whatever you want to call it, and that gives you a piercing projectile, much like a cannonball or something like that for other factions. And that's very important against Phoenix Guard, because Phoenix Guard, even if they're spaghetti line, it means you can pick off a few models with every hit. And unlike the Ancient Stegodon, because the Ancient Stegodon has very, very poor armor piercing values, and it's very short ranged with its battery of blow darts, essentially. So if for this sort of thing, I definitely can't do an Ancient Stegodon. It has to be normal Stegodon. With their very respectable armor, these guys will be basically immune to the vast majority of high elf ranged fire, whether that be their lords sniping away, or Lothern Sea Guard, or archers. The only real the only real range damage they can do is either magic or bolt throwers. But those are not something I'm that worried about. They should be able to shut them down pretty effectively. Of course, they do have a bonus against infantry. They have armor piercing, so they will rampage through enemy troops fairly effectively as well. The Skink Priest of Heavens is coming in with 4 spells, actually, because I wasn't entirely sure what I should bring, and wasn't entirely sure what my opponent would bring, so I wanted to be a bit flexible. So I came in with Harmonic Convergence to boost my own troops. Curse of Midnight went to debuff enemy troops. Wind Blast for damage, and Uran's Thunderbolt for damage, depending on whether or not my opponent clumped up or not. And both of these spells are fairly cost effective, and I'm definitely hoping to get some good value out of them, and use them to bring my opponent's troops down to size. My actual infantry contingent, throwing it into slow-mo here, the ballistas will start sniping away at the Phoenix Guard almost immediately. My front line is composed of 2 Skink cohorts, slightly veteraned up. These guys have okay missile damage as long as their ammunition is, as long as they have ammo, but they only have 3 rounds. Their stats are not particularly good, but they're there to pursue enemy targets, absorb the enemy charge, pursue fleeing troops, get into my enemy's backline, support the SARS warriors, that sort of stuff. Unfortunately, because about over half of my money, about 7,000, is in my hero squad, my infantry squad could be nowhere near as large as I would like. 4 units of SARS warriors with shields. Of course, you want shields because high elves have a lot of shooting. These guys are fairly expensive, but they do come in with, and their melee stats are not particularly good, but except for their weapon strength, they're reasonable armor at 60, and they're very, very high HP per model. And that is really what I'm counting on here to carry me through. They do, of course, rampage once they drop below 50% HP, and that is definitely something I'm a little worried about. Behind that, I have a unit of Temple Guard. These guys do not rampage. They have armor piercing, bonus against large. They basically never break. They are shielded, but their armor is not that good. And their melee attack and melee defense is not that amazing, all things considered. But once again, they are a bit like the Star Wars Warriors in the sense that they have very high weapon strength and HP per model, and that's kind of where their core strengths lie. For my opponent, he did decide to bring a pretty elite but very unit heavy rather than a hero heavy army. He actually went pretty cheap on his lord, I think, because he brought Tyrion without too much pomp or frills. He is, of course, mounted on his horse. I forget what the horse's name is. I'm sorry. But that gives him very high mobility. Tyrion has very high melee stats, so he could definitely be a bit of a problem it could be a bit of a problem for Crockgar to hit him. But when he's mounted on a horse, it does make him a large target, which will make it a little easier for Crockgar to hit, because Crockgar does have a bonus against large when he's mounted on Grimlock. My opponent does have a pretty powerful front line. He has 5 units of White Lions of Crace, and these guys are not. They're a lower end Elven infantry. I would surprisingly kind of says how what low end is for elves when White Lions of Crace are their low end, but they have very respectable stats, especially as long as their martial prowess is up. They have a 30% built-in missile resistance, 90 armor. And they have armor piercing melee. They're just a very decent unit, and I do believe they only cost about 800 gold. So they are definitely pretty powerful. Alongside them, he does have 2 units of Phoenix Guard, and these guys cause fear. Like I said, I talked them up a bunch in the intro. These guys are pretty crazy. They have fairly high speed, 100 armor, built-in 30% physical resist, martial mastery, which boosts them up to 50 melee attack and 52 melee defense when they are over 50% HP. Respectable weapon strength, bonus against large. These guys are just amazing, especially given they cost 1400, but given even that, they're a very, very good unit. 3 units of Lothran Sea Guard. These guys, of course, are unshielded because lizardmen don't bring that much skirmish power usually, and it's not like shields would help against the ballistas anyway. And these guys can definitely outrange anything I can bring to the field otherwise. Their lack of armor piercing range will definitely help me or help my monsters. But these guys still have respectable melee defense and melee attack with a bonus against large. They're basically very comparable to Elven Spearmen with a lower model count. And, their ranged fire could definitely be a bit of a problem for my infantry contingent. Finally, out here on the flank is a unit of Dragon Princes, and these guys are very mobile heavy cav with very high melee stats. They're one of the only 2 units, I do believe, that has martial mastery, just like the Phoenix Guard, and that means that they actually have very high melee defense and attack, especially the melee defense is pretty impressive given that they are shock cav. And they, of course, do have another built-in physical resist of only 25%, which is still respectable, 100 armor, fire resist, which is irrelevant against my units, but good speed. They're just very high charge bonus. They're a very good unit overall. So throwing into full gear here, you can see my ballistas are sniping away at the Phoenix Guard, trying to pick off models, but unfortunately they are shooting at the corner of the unit, which is very bad. It means I'm not really getting too many model picks. I do try to push the skinks forward to get some pot shots in on these Phoenix Guard, and you can see a few shots are going in. And the Phoenix Guard is definitely dropping. They are down to about less than 75% of their HP at this point. Unfortunately, the Lothran Sea Guard does get some volleys into my skink cohorts and decimates them. Really, really bludgeons them pretty bad. Now Tyrion is pushing forward, just trying to intercept these guys. I'm countercharging with my Star Wars Warriors, planning to get my full charges in if I can against these White Lions of Crace and the Phoenix Guard and all that sort of stuff. Over here, you can see my opponent is clumping up the Phoenix Guard and White Lions of Crace, which is good because it means a single unit of Star Wars Warriors can tie all of them down. Crockgar is countercharging Tyrion, and I'm hoping that he can mess him up. You can see over there, I do knock all these Phoenix Guard over by popping the swiftness of Itzel, and now I'm kind of whacking away on Tyrion. I don't believe Tyrion has any sort of self-sustain. So if I can snipe him away, my opponent will be lordless. He's trying to hit Crockgar in return, but Crockgar is very high HP. Unfortunately, the Dragon Princes do get a charge here into the rear of my Star Wars Warriors, and despite the fact that I get Uranus Thunderbolt in on these Phoenix Guard, my opponent is able to rout off these 2 units of Star Wars Warriors. In the meantime, these skinks which retreated are going to start being able to throw javelins into these guys, though a little too late. The Archers are not doing very much to the Skink Chief and the Stegodon. There's very little they can do about that. Meantime, this Phoenix Guard is actually below 50%, so they no longer have their martial mastery. Crockgar is in here beating the snot out of Tyrion, who is falling apart, and because I do believe lizardmen infantry have somewhat high mass, this guy is not really able to get out. Tyrion is just surrounded, and he's getting bludgeoned to death. Interestingly enough, he only has martial prowess. He does not actually have martial mastery. Given that Tyrion is supposed to be, I do believe in lore, one of the best, if not the best duelist in the world, that's kind of hilarious. Over here, surprisingly, the Sarge Warriors are actually out-trading the White Lions of Craze, despite the fact that the White Lions have much high, they have armor piercing, and the Lizards do not. They have respectable armor. The fact that the Lizards have a very high melee attack, weapon strength, and very high HP per model means that they can actually tank and exchange with units like this very, very effectively. Now, realizing that my left flank over here has been completely wrecked, and the fact that my skinks are now being overwhelmed by a bunch of angry dragon princes, I do commit the skinks to tie down the dragon princes, and I do commit my mounted lords or mounted heroes into the fray here. You can see the Phoenix Guard definitely causing me a bit of trouble here. I do pop another unit Thunderbolt. I do believe this is a normal cast. And it should hit this clump, and you can see it takes off 7 models. Definitely not a bad trade, and it does very respectable amounts of damage. In the meantime, these Sarge Warriors have caused these White Lions to rout off and are now pincering these White Lions. And many of these units will shortly begin to rampage because they're just taking so much damage. You can see the rear charge just coming from the Dragon Princes. The Dragon Princes are doing absolute champion work here. And the Skinks are not really able to deal with them. They might be able to drag a few of the Dragon Princes down to the muck, but really the only counter I have to them are the Temple Guards and my Lords. I do drop a Cold-Blooded on the Temple Guards, which may have been a mistake, as it does drop their stats pretty markedly. In the meantime, Krokgar and my Skink Priest of Heavens have plowed into the enemy backline and are chasing off this Lothern Sea Guard. You can see some of the returning Sarge shields are slugging it out with the Phoenix Guard, who have been brought down to size by the fact that they lost so much HP. Krokgar has come back, and this is what I'm trying. At this point, I'm just trying to juggle back and forth with my Lords and constantly apply terror pressure to my opponent. The Skink Chief is definitely getting mauled by the Phoenix Guard. You can see just how well they trade, even when they've lost all their sort of buffs. I definitely need to extricate this guy. In the meantime, though, these guys, you can see the bar has definitely started moving in my favor. Another unit's Thunderbolt goes down to the Lothern Sea Guard, and I am able to push in the Skink Priest of Heavens and just kind of start chasing these guys off. And my opponent is definitely kind of, at this point, fallen apart. He does still have a clump of troops here. He's missing Tyrion, though. Dragon Princes have escaped all the way to there. The Sarge Warriors over here are slugging out with the Phoenix Guard, and they might actually win because they still have a respectable amount of HP left, though not with all these White Lions collapsing on them. And now that all these Lothern Sea Guard have been routed off, I'm able to shift focus, and you can see this guy's not really taking very much missile damage from them at all. And my opponent will not be able to stop him from just charging through this very thin line of White Lions. You can see I do fire Hand of the Gods there at the Phoenix Guard. It's not going to do very much. It's meant to against single targets. In the meantime, my Skink Chief has kind of helped rout off this area, and I will be able to commit him against the Dragon Princes, where he should, I'm hoping, do pretty well. I am pushing my Skink Priest of Heaven straight through to the Lothern Sea Guard in the back here. Rather than going after the first unit, I'm trying to force these guys to turn, that way wasting some of their time, and just kind of keep my opponent trying to flex and match. At this point, my opponent's army is routing, and the Chain Shatter has begun, and that's going to be game in what was a very close and tight match. So, I definitely think, and I've mentioned this with Skaven, I think there's a very sort of strict, I guess, or very rigid sort of hierarchy at this point to which factions are the best in quick match. I'm pretty sure it is my very firm opinion that Skaven are at the bottom of the roster as far as strength goes. Lizardmen are third, and then High Elves and Dark Elves are competing for first, and it's a little iffy who's better. Probably High Elves just because of how strong martial prowess and martial mastery are. But Dark Elves have some very powerful units, especially in the range department, so it's a bit of a toss-up. You can see that my army performed fairly well. So the Sarge Warriors, especially when given the opportunity to work, could absolutely shred through the White Lines of Krace, and it's just simply because their HP per model is so huge, and their weapon strength is still pretty respectable, so even with armor, they will get a lot of damage done. The Skink Priest of Heavens got huge amounts of work done between the Ballista, the Bombardment, and just charging around. The Skink Chief did okay, and Krokgar did okay as well, and he assassinated Tyrion, which was a big boost. The Skinks did reasonable, you couldn't really expect much from them. The Temple Guard did okay as well. So most of my units did pretty well, except for the units that kind of got run down by the Dragon Princes. For my opponent, the White Lions did okay. The Phoenix Guard, which I focused very heavily, did not get very much done. And the Lothern Sea Guard definitely struggled because I had they couldn't really shut down my high priority targets. I had over half of my army's value in these three heroes. If my opponent had been able to snipe them down, it would have been a big loss for me, but he simply didn't have the resources to do so. The Dragon Princes performed very well, and they're definitely a very powerful and very scary unit, I think, when utilized correctly. To To counter this sort of stuff, as high elves, I definitely think focus firing at the infantry and actually trying to break up the infantry blocks is pretty important. Definitely don't lose your lord. The loss of Tyrion there was, I think, a big reason for why my opponent fell apart in the long run. If you're going for a lord and simply trying to keep him alive, try to just avoid fighting really, or go for softer targets. You could have gone after this king chief or the caster with their much lower melee stats. But lizardmen heroes can definitely be a bit difficult to bring down if you don't have ranged armor piercing. So especially for high elves, I think it's better off to just crush their infantry contingent and go from there. I could be wrong. That's just my 2 cents on the issue. I also think that bringing your lord in on a dragon is generally a smarter idea than on Tyrion on foot. But definitely was a bit of a fun game. It was definitely interesting to test this sort of strategy out. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, any questions about Quake Match or Total War Warhammer 2, any of that sort of stuff, be sure to post those down in the comments, and I will respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.